Welcome, everyone, to the U.S. Department of Education and to the National Library of Education, which is one of the best education research libraries in the country. Our mission here is to ensure equal access for all students to an excellent education. Today's event, Math, Science, and Music for K through post-secondary students, is a model for achieving that mission. Mr. Hancock, thank you, and thank you all of your collaborators here for this initiative, as it represents excellent work and your care for educating the country's students according to the best knowledge and the best practices, all of the students. The arts are a path to knowledge for all students. You can see the visual and literary works on your way out today in the lobby. Now, we have in the lobby an art lover's book, a sign-in book, to write in for people who visit the art exhibits. And a few days ago, as I passed by it, I noticed a new message from someone named Mohammed from Egypt. Must have been with the International Affairs Office visiting. And he wrote this: "The most powerful place ever is the school." I have goosebumps now saying those words. And his composition of that sentence is just profound. And so when I read it, of course, I thought about what Mr. Hancock and all of you have been working on and what you're contributing to students with your lesson plans and your multiple resources, indeed creating more of that powerful possibility we call school. Thank you, thank all of you for being here with us. I hope that you each come to meet many people in this room because not only are you all excellent in your fields, but you're already on board with spreading the knowledge and the care and the power Mr. Hancock is contributing to learning. I would like now to introduce our leader at the U.S. Department of Education, our new leader, who in a very short space of time in his life has been a teacher, an education leader locally, at the state level, and now at the national level. From his personal space and from his role in the Obama administration, Secretary of Education John King is focused keenly on the value of a well-rounded education and on ensuring its possibility for all students in our country. This, of course, includes the arts. So please meet Secretary of Education John King.
Thanks for that warm introduction. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
So I am pleased to be here, and pleased to be here with all of you, really celebrating the role of the arts in a well-rounded education and the strong connections between the arts and math and science. It's also appropriate to be celebrating the incredible work of Herbie Hancock and this incredible collaboration during Jazz Appreciation Month. So pleased to be here with all of you. I was thinking this morning as I was preparing for our conversation of what the First Lady has said about the role of the arts. And she powerfully said the arts are not just a nice thing to do if there is free time or if one can afford it. Paintings and poetry, music and design, they all define who we are as a people. And I think that's exactly right. And one of the things that I've been focused on in leading the department and look forward to continuing to work on up until the very last moment of the administration is the opportunity we have as a country to broaden the definition of educational excellence. I think we have to acknowledge that at times, particularly over the last few years, the conversation about English and math and closing gaps in English and math, which has to be a priority, has led some to make the mistaken conclusion that what we need to do to close those gaps is to do less science, less social studies, less of the arts, less socio-emotional learning, less time on world languages. And that's exactly backwards. And part of what's so important about this event is it's a reminder that the arts are inextricably linked with student success across disciplines. That students who have strong experiences in the arts actually are going to do better as readers. They're going to do better in math. They're going to do better across the disciplines because of those academic experiences, because of the way that the arts taps into students' creativity, and because it helps to develop whole people with an appreciation, with an aesthetic appreciation that will serve them well throughout their lives. And so we have to look at our education system with the acknowledgement that English and math are necessary but not sufficient for students' long-term success. And if we want students to be truly ready for success in college, careers, and life, arts must play a central role in their education. The new law, the new Every Student Succeeds Act, the new federal education law that the President signed in December, gives us new tools. It creates new flexibility for states to broaden their definition of educational excellence for accountability purposes. It makes an important investment through the Title IV program in the expansion of quality arts programs and quality STEM programs. And today we have a good example of how we can bring STEM and the arts together in what people will often call STEAM, right? We also have the opportunity with the new law to think differently about how we address the needs of our struggling schools. We're seeing tremendous success with our Turnaround Arts initiative, which is focused on the idea that in our struggling schools, an infusion of quality arts programming can be the thing that unlocks students' passion and energy about their education and improves performance. And so states have a new flexibility there as well as they think about how to improve performance in their struggling schools. As we approach this work, and I'm sure this will be a topic for the panel discussion, we've got to be focused on equity. We know that students, our low-income students, our students of color, our students most at risk are often the students who get least access to quality arts experience and also get the least access to quality coursework in the STEM fields. And so we've got to have a keen focus both on equity and on excellence. We have great allies in this work, and I want to acknowledge that we have Brian Alexander Duckworth, who's here from Congressman Johnson's office, representing the emerging STEAM caucus in the Congress that is committed to supporting this work. So we have good momentum with the new law, we have good allies in Congress, and so we have much to celebrate as we embark on today's event. And let me focus for a moment on the event itself. Certainly, Herbie Hancock needs no introduction from me. His accomplishments are numerous, but I think one of the things that stands out from my very first conversation with Herbie is his commitment to young people and to education and to the future generations. There are lots of folks in our society who've achieved great success and are quite happy just to enjoy that success without paying it forward. And Herbie stands out as a person who has chosen to commit his time and his energy and his resources to paying it forward, to creating opportunities for a next generation of young people. Herbie also is committed to the idea that STEM and arts can be connected, and that maybe is even reflected in his own academic background. I note that Herbie went to Grinnell College and double majored, I understand, in music and in electrical engineering, which is an impressive combination all in of itself. So that understanding of the connection between music and math, music and science is a lifelong understanding that Herbie brings to this work. He's brought together experts in the STEM fields and the arts to think creatively about how we build instructional experiences for students that engage, inspire, and educate. And that's really what today is about, ensuring that we provide a well-rounded education to students that inspires them, that empowers them, that gives them a sense of possibility beyond what they may even themselves be able to anticipate. And so this is a great celebration, I think, of the work. And hopefully we will have a thoughtful conversation about how schools can translate these big ideas into classroom experiences that are transformative for kids. So thank you all so much for being here. Thank you, Herbie, for your leadership. Thank you, panelists, for this conversation today. We certainly look forward to it here at the department. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Secretary King, for hosting this discussion on math, science, and music at the Department of Education and giving us the opportunity to make our nation's students and teachers aware of this innovative initiative. It's an honor for me to welcome all of you to the premiere. This is really the premiere of math, science, and music. And it's a groundbreaking approach to learning that will revolutionize the way that our young people discover and master essential skills in the fields of science, technology, engineering, and math. This is the first of many programs centered around International Jazz Day. Well, we have many others. And it's celebrated every April 30th in over 190 countries on all 7 continents. And International Jazz Day was created to commemorate jazz, America's greatest contribution to the world of music, and to demonstrate that learning about and adopting the ethics inherent in jazz can make positive changes to our world. A world that now, more than ever, needs more creativity and innovation and less anger and hostility to help solve the challenges that we have to deal with every single day and those that we will be facing in the future. So, with International Jazz Day on the horizon, this is a perfect time, and I hope you agree, to introduce math, science, and music. But jazz is just one of the many musical art forms employed in math, science, and music programs. In conjunction with the Thelonious Monk Institute of Jazz, a renowned panel of experts, and a highly respected website developer, our program offers unique ideas, opportunities, and options that will enrich the learning process, expand creative thinking, and ignite interest in science, technology, engineering, and math, ensuring that our next generation of students are ready and able to make valuable contributions to a world where knowledge of these subjects are a necessity because their intrinsic principles have become an essential part of our daily lives. I'd like to thank John King, Secretary of Education, and Jackie Zimmerman for hosting us this morning and for their support and interest in our field-tested curricula that is going live as we speak. Thank you very much.
Shall we say wow? Thank you. It's amazing. So before the panelists begin their presentations, I'd like you to meet one more person. It is because of this person, Tom Carter, and his staff, including Mika Sheena here, that our gathering today is possible, and that we at the department have the honor of hosting it. Tom and Mika, thank you for not only working with me all these months on this, but for the way you work as collaborators. I very much appreciate that. You're just wonderful to work with. Thank you for that. Now, doing justice to telling you about Tom Carter would take up the remainder of the time we have at this panel discussion. So just let me abbreviate. He is co-founder exactly 30 years ago of the Thelonious Monk Institute of Jazz with the Thelonious Monk family, and of which Mr. Hancock is the chairman. He is the co-founder of the Thelonious Monk International Jazz Competition to continue the global outreach of the Institute and its educational mission, launching the careers of many jazz artist. If you haven't been to the semifinals or finals of the competition, you have missed a superior life experience. So look out for it this fall, right? Let me see, September, right? September, okay. On the Institute's 25th anniversary, he was the co-establisher of International Jazz Day. This year, for the first time, it will be in the United States, here in Washington, D.C., at the White House on Friday, which Mr. Hancock has already said is 196 nations in the world participate. He is a driving force behind the creation of the Thelonious Monk Institute of Jazz Performance, a full scholarship, master's level college program recognized as a model training ground for young aspiring jazz artists. And finally, and an egotistical shout out on my part, he is the co-conspirator with J.B. Dias, Education Director of the Monk Institute, of the annual Jazz Informants here at the Department of Education, which teaches those in attendance about how jazz works and how it represents the values of a perfect democracy. It will take place here Friday, beginning at 12:30, and you're all invited to come to that. Please welcome this dedicated professional and accomplished leader in the realm of jazz, jazz education, and public service, and president of the Thelonious Monk Institute of Jazz, Tom Carter.
Thank you, Jackie. It's such an honor and a pleasure to be here and be back at the Department of Education. We've worked with the Department of Education for the past 30 years. It's been an incredible partnership. When we first began, it was just an idea to create an institute in the name of Thelonious Monk and to take jazz music more and more into the schools. Over the last 30 years, we've expanded. We started out, and this is our 30th year in the schools here in D.C., but we've expanded into schools all over America. And for the last 20 years, Herbie Hancock and I and others, we have traveled around the country and had special programs in schools all over the country. And we've learned more and more that jazz reaches far beyond just the music realm. And as we're going into these schools, we're seeing that all these kids, they have their headphones and their earbuds, but they really want to reach just beyond the music, but a lot of times there are challenges. And so 4 years ago at the United Nations, Herbie announced the concept of math, science, and music to really use jazz and music as a means to really introduce the basics and to expand into the areas of math and science and make it more engaging. And so over the last 4 years, this concept has been evolving. Mika Shino, who everyone will meet shortly, has been a real driving force in putting this panel together and putting together a group of esteemed academicians and others to put this concept into a reality. We're very honored to announce this morning that we have a lead partner who has just committed to us a multi-year commitment, and so we have is Northrop Grumman, and we have with us the president of the Northrop Grumman Foundation. So I'd like for Sandra Evers-Manley to please stand and for us to all acknowledge this, not only a commitment today, but it's a multi-year that will really make sure that this continues forward. The person that has worked with Herbie and I on this and who's really worked with every one of these members that you'll be hearing from today of this panel, but of this team that's put together math, science, and music, is an individual that we met 14 years ago when she was with UNESCO in Paris, and she was a driving force behind Philosophy Day, and that first introduced Herbie and I to a day that is committed to a real area of importance, and from there, the whole concept of International Jazz Day evolved. But she has come on board. She's with the Institute full time here with really compiling everything around International Jazz Day and the outreach, but also with math, science, and music. So please welcome Mika Shino.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's really a huge honor for me to be here. I've been working very closely with our distinguished panelists. And before I introduce everybody, I would first like to welcome our distinguished guest, Mr. Sven Ostveit from UNESCO. Mr. Ostveit is the director of the Executive Office at the education sector at UNESCO. He flew here for 24 hours from Oslo, so it's really a great honor. We look forward to working with UNESCO closely on this, and look forward to a great partnership. Please.
Thank you very much, Mika, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Being very passionate about music and education myself, it's a great honor for me to be here, to be with you, and to see how we can take this forward. I think it's a extremely precious and valuable initiative that I'm very excited about, and I hope and I know we will be working well together. First of all, I would like to thank Secretary King for hosting this press launch and panel discussion. And I would like to thank UNESCO Goodwill Ambassador, Mr. Herbie Hancock, and Thelonious Monk Institute of Jazz President Tom Carter for inviting UNESCO to be a partner in this bold and exciting new initiative, Math, Science and Music. At UNESCO, it is our mission to contribute to the building of peace, sustainable development and intercultural dialogue, with education as one of its principal activities to achieve this aim. The organization is committed to a holistic and humanistic vision of quality education worldwide, and the belief that education plays a fundamental role in human, social, and economic development. A big challenge, and you may or may not agree with me, is that education systems very often are a bit old-fashioned, bureaucratic, perhaps more conservative than anything else, but we need, and I think this initiative is very, very important to try to dynamize and help education system contribute more to a more sustainable development in all respects of the world. As the lead United Nations agency in education, UNESCO helps countries develop and reform their education systems from early childhood through primary, secondary, and higher education in all settings, formal and non-formal. All this in line with the recently adopted Sustainable Development Goal number 4 that you may be aware of, which reads, ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. We then promote early childhood education, which provides holistic development of children from birth to 8 years old, and work with governments and partners to expand the availability and quality of early childhood education around the world. Primary and secondary education remain essential building blocks for ensuring lifelong learning opportunities. And following the rise in access to primary education in recent years at a global level, UNESCO is now helping countries cope with the growing demand for quality secondary education. Higher education, as I'm sure you all will agree with me, is key to the development of knowledge-based societies. As the only UN agency with a mandate in higher education, we help to develop evidence-based policies in response to new trends, and we work to make higher education more inclusive and innovative. Today, innovation, as has already been pointed out, is key to unlocking the potential for our youth. If we can combine an innovative approach to educational development with creativity, technology, and insight into what can inspire and enable young people to learn more about the subjects which are fundamental building blocks to lifelong learning, I think we can say that we are moving in the right direction. And I believe that math, science, and music will help us to get a little closer to helping teachers and students towards the path of lifelong learning. In this partnership with the Thelonious Monk Institute of Jazz, our hope is to create alternative ways to move youth by tapping into something that is universal, and that is music. If we can create a momentum for youth to be excited about math and science concepts, which oftentimes are challenging, as we know, and intimidating for many, through music, it will be a groundbreaking new approach that can be shared and spread worldwide. Myself and UNESCO, we look forward to working with you and the Department of Education in developing this truly innovative educational platform. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pam. I would now like to introduce our distinguished guests. From my left, Professor Andre Ballo from San Francisco State University.
Thank you.
Professor Gina Grayhair from University of Massachusetts Lowell. Professor Sue Corey from San Francisco State University. Professor Jean Bamberger from University of California, Berkeley, also MIT Emeritus. Professor Alex Ruthman from New York University. Professor Vijay Iyer from Harvard University. Professor Eric Rosenbaum from MIT. Ms. Rajna Swaminathan from Harvard University. And Professor Dan Newman from Johns Hopkins. Thank you so much for joining us. I would like to ask each panelist to give a brief overview of their work, and we can open up for Q&A afterwards. So I would like to start first with Professor Alex Ruthman, who not only contributed a web interface and several other projects for math, science, and music, but also created this beautiful web platform. So please, Professor.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here and introduce and give you the first taste of mathsciencemusic.org, which just launched today. You can load it on your mobile phones and on your desktops and start playing. We're really looking at math, science, music as this toolkit for teachers, assembling the best resources at the intersection of math, science, and music. It's been a pleasure to work with our launch partners and assemble material moving forward. And if we have success with the video, you'll get a little video walkthrough of the site here. We'll give it a sec, and I'll talk over it to just give you a quick preview and then show you what we've been working on. So, one of the things that went into this, and it's not, I'm fortunate to work with a wonderful team at NYU in our music experience design lab to really take in a lot of the themes that you've heard today from the panelists around creativity, the importance of play. If you load up the website, you can touch and play the logo. We wanted to imbue playfulness, creativity, fun. Here are the many projects that you're seeing through here, all at the intersection of math, science, music. We encourage you to sign up. Give us your email. We won't spam you. We will send you all the best resources and updates. You can click in, for instance, here, Music and Cognition, and view a wonderful playlist. You'll get to see these as these move forward. Assembling a little about page, resources and links, interactive materials, as well as who the audience is for, the concepts, the processes that are really bridging across math, science, and music from here. So this is just the beginning. We're very thrilled to be working over the next few years here to curate more materials and pull them together, and can't wait to show them to you in the rest of the panel presentations. So the Groove Pizza is the project that came from my lab as a playful way of using math and shapes and angles and grooves that kids know to play and to create, not to necessarily use music to teach math, but to use music as an engaging opportunity to play. Using math as the input here, we can explore a variety of different beats. This is Michael Jackson's Chameleon. With that, you can reduce the number of slices to explore different angles. You can load in here, bring up different beats, show the interior angle. That was Herbie's idea. When we were showing it to him, we implemented it here. Here it is for you. And you can easily kind of add and remove toppings. What's more fun than kind of space and groove and toppings and pizza for kids? Dragging in zero-sided shapes and all sorts of different shapes to actually play and create grooves. A lot of what we focus on is lowering the barriers to creative expression, and one of the ways that we do that is by making it easier to play with music. A lot of what we're working on is aimed at elementary and middle school, but it expands up, and we're seeing a lot of that. And one of the other themes that was talked about here is that what you're seeing here has been play tested with kids in schools. In New York City, we've been working at this with several schools that we work with the Urban Arts Partnership, as well as some other great schools in the city. You can create your groove here, play around, and then when you're done, you can share it. That's very important today for kids to be able to share their work with each other, open it up in a web-based creating environment where you can go take it deeper. So that's our little contribution to this, and we look forward to your feedback and your play as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Alex. I would now like to introduce Professor Ballo, Andre Ballo, who worked with Professor Sue Corey at San Francisco State University.
Our children need to be trained in relevant things they will use for a lifetime. They need to acquire and develop knowledge and skills that are relevant and worthwhile, both personally and professionally. Learning should be practical, and what they learn should have lasting value that's as measurable as it is merited. It all needs to be focused, coherent, and clear for everyone involved. Those all are the core values of the modern educational standards. And once I thoroughly agree with, that's what I want for my daughter, and I know as a parent, I'm not alone. So I started to ask questions, and we started to work together with Dr. Sue Corey when we created Tunes Academic Music, which is a nonprofit organization. Music isn't as an isolated thing, either in practice or as a subject. What we learn and do there isn't compartmentalized for the rest of our lives with no carryover or interdiscipline reach. The problems musicians face in learning, creating, and practicing music are the very same ones we tackle everywhere else. Many of them are actually mathematical, and accordingly, the knowledge and the skills we apply in the pursuit of music are highly compelling version of those educational standards seeks to develop everywhere else, particularly in its math programs. Math and music are both about identifying, understanding, and applying patterns, usually in symbolic terms. Both require problem-solving, critical thinking, social skills, improvisation, and vital forms of creativity. The difference being that with music, kids see these activities as fun forms of play, not torture or drudgery. Music is hard, and so is math, both benefiting from being broken down into bit-sized chunks that are playful, fun, and immediately practical. Unlike math, however, this is much easier to do with music, partly because the end of result of learning about is making music, it's music itself. While the end of the result of math lesson is seeing more numbers strength about on the page. Even if the one teaching music is in this way isn't a music teacher, in this case, they're probably just a classroom teacher. All these little bits can be later put back together by someone with more expertise in a topic to make for a gifted child musician, whereas with math, the culminating moment never usually comes for students aside from applying it on yet another math test. In trying saving music education for my daughter, in more compelling, we actually stumbled upon a more compelling way to teach math through music, and our result will prove it. As a father of amazing young girl, I've been thrilled with what we have accomplished so far. As our parents know, the early ages of the kids' upbringing are the most vital and set the tone for the rest of their life. We managed to develop ways of raising the practical and academic achievements of our young children by orders of magnitude, make it playful and fun enough that it becomes their favorite part of the day. Though music was the catalyst, a medium for all of it, we inadvertently created the program for kids that they both love and benefit from that takes no additional funding. We found a way to teach math better through music. We found a way to teach music better through math. And they ended up being one and the same time. The arts are among our most important subjects, but though it pains me to say this, I believe the achievements of the potential of our children should come first. even if educating them in those very arts were the cost. They were also hard to teach in particular ways that aligned with the means of the aims of the Common Core, which had up to now made the inclusion problematic at the best. Tunes Academic Music has changed that by aligning the arts and math in a ways that bolster both programs. If music and math weren't the core of our program, it would still be a wonderful program by all objective criteria. What we've developed is about as close as we will ever get to a free educational lunch. A no-cost program, kids that love to solve many problems at once without a single downside. With your help, we can continue spreading this to more students in our immediate area. And with any luck, let it sing out from there to the rest of the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask Professor Sue Corey to present her work.
Good morning. I'm Sue Corey. I'm from San Francisco State University. I'm in the Department of Special Education. I teach teachers how to teach students with mild to moderate disabilities. So these are the students who have invisible disabilities, so to speak. They have a learning disability, they have ADHD, they belong in the general ed classroom. They have average to above average intelligence. They have every right to enter the STEAM careers and have a wonderful future. And so I really harp on my teachers to be rigorous in their teaching and make it fun. So in comes Common Core. Phil Darrow likened past standards to you buy a Grecian urn and you ask the dealer to send it to your house, and he says, okay, and he takes a hammer and he smashes it and he says, I'm gonna send one piece every day for the next year. You'll have all the pieces at the end of the year and it'll be easy to put them together. That was like past math standards. Now we have the Common Core, which is a really elegant, rigorous, focused, and coherent set of standards. And not just that, the concepts that students have to know, they go through the years and they're visible. And so that should make it easier for us to teach mathematics. With the content standards comes the behavior standards or the practice standards. And these are behaviors we want to see students engaged in the classroom. And you see things like rigor, make sense and persevere. They have to talk to each other. They have to know what tools to use. They have to attend to precision. Now these are the 2014 music standards. And as you'll see, it's performing, responding, attention to conceptual understanding. They're very similar. We want to see the same behaviors in music as we do in math. So I hope I'm making the argument why we should teach math and music together. Music has the capacity to engage students in listening activities, movement activities, reasoning, dialogue, and response. It goes across language barriers, cultures, and achievement barriers, and offers the capacity to engage a very diverse classroom of students in activities. In addition, these are some research facts that we know. And you'll see, we know that when students are engaged in music throughout the curriculum, their language development is better. We also know that African American and Latino students, when they're exposed to music instruction, have higher achievement rates, higher graduation rates, and they're more likely to go to college. These are important reasons why we should have music in the curriculum. And we have to teach math. They should be taught together, and I'll tell you more why. Music is naturally throughout the curriculum. But this is interesting because this is Richard Smerek interference theory of music perception. Sounds complicated, but it can be very basic. Just like a lot of math and music, you have basic levels that can engage students, but you have very complicated concepts that gifted students can partake in. We don't want to have a ceiling in the curriculum, but we also don't want to keep kids at a bottom level. And this is a way to really engage everyone in the classroom. Why music? Why do we use it? We teach on using the concepts of universal design for learning. And this is important because it really does, kids are so different. We have language barriers, we have achievement barriers, and so when we think of these things in designing our instruction, we use all the different parts of the brain. But when it comes to things like engagement, we know that if kids are attending to what we're doing in the classroom, they're more likely to learn. Also with representation, there is not one way to teach math and there's not one way to teach music. So we have to provide teachers with a lot of different ways to do it. And when we do that, more children in the classroom participate. And finally, action and expression. We don't have to evaluate or measure what a child knows with a pencil and paper. We have all different ways. For example, if a student can clap out a beat based on a time signature, well, aren't they adding and subtracting fractions based on music notation? So we have to think differently. So students definitely, when music's in the classroom, they are happier and they are joyful, and that's really important. We actually used music notation and rhythm to teach fractions. We were in a school where 90% of the students were eligible for free and reduced lunch. About 50% of the students were English language learners. And their understanding of fractions, what we did, we totally started with music and had them reading music and beating. They were actually adding and subtracting fractions. And it was really fun, and we liked it. That's the other thing. When teachers are using music, it is way more fun to teach than if you just have a piece of chalk and a blackboard. So what we did in middle school, we wanted to improve proportional reasoning. I don't know if you see, we started with areas that were traditionally kind of complicated. Fraction is one of the first really difficult things kids encounter. Then middle school, they encounter proportional reasoning. About 50% of students right now in the United States end their math career in proportional reasoning. They can't get beyond it, and that's the end of the math career. It doesn't have to be that way. Here what we did, we used the octave and the Fibonacci code to keep kids engaged in the curriculum. Really fun. Do you remember when you walked into the high school classroom and the sample problem looked like that on the board? And you said, oh, I have to go to the nurse, right? How about if music was playing and you walked in and the teacher said, I want you to listen to 2 seconds of these 2 math sentences, and then talk to your partner and see how they're different. So music first, get them engaged, math, connect it later. There's a natural connection. We just have to bring it to a conscious level in the classroom. Again, I wanted to come back to universal design. Kids are engaged, they're talking, they're reasoning, and there's all different ways that we can evaluate them. So, what's next? We have to spread the word. How do we do it? Well, first of all, we just start doing it. Because there's not one way to do it. A lot of times teachers want a manual. They want to know the best way. Well, it's not like that anymore today. And with the Common Core, teachers really have to work hard, and they should. But they should be happy, and they should have a reason to be joyful, and bringing music in the classroom can do that. So one of my favorite things on the bottom of the slide, it says, it is easier to act your way into a new way of thinking than to think your way in a new way of acting. And so let's just bring the music in. Let's get started with it, and then take it from there. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would now like to ask Professor Jean Bamberger to talk a bit about her work. She collaborated with 2 of the panelists here, Professor Eric Rosenbaum and Professor Grayer. Please.
Well, I'm going to get very nitty-gritty, and I'm going to get your participation, I hope. The main goal that we have had, or that I've had, is to help kids, not ask them to give up what they know how to do already, but to help them learn in the service of developing and better understanding what they know how to do. So, for example, just keeping time when listening to a piece of music. You listen to music in a that's a critical beginning of how to enter into this world of math. This beat that we so easily clap or tap or dance to actually creates a unit for measuring time. But it's generated by the music. Following the beat becomes a path into the mathematics of proportion and its proportional relations that most specifically help to organize time. So I'm going to play a little tune, and I'm going to ask you to keep time. Let's see if we can get some sound here. Okay, now exactly what I hoped happened. I see some people doing this, and some people doing this. Okay, so what's the relationship between those two things? I'll do it here. Well, the relationship between the two things is obviously 3 to 1. Okay, so we've got proportion. Yeah, okay, you never think about that, you just keep time. But when you're keeping time, you're doing math. Not math like you do in school, but it's there already. So all that's necessary is to do what I just did, namely point out to you what you know how to do already. Actually, it was my MIT students working with my interactive computer program, Impromptu, who discovered this embodied musical math. And learning from the MIT students, we now began working with children. So I went into a public school in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and got kids doing like you were just doing and lots more. Especially kids who are struggling in school. They're listening, they're noticing, they're probing, they're thinking, and the app becomes a mediator between the music they're enjoying every day and school-based paper and pencil math. This includes the concepts that are the most difficult for 4th, 5th, 6th grade kids: proportion, ratio, equivalent fractions, common multiples. So putting time back into the music, they're actually hearing the math happening, just like you just did. So for just one example of what we're really doing, the kids use the app to make percussion accompaniments to tunes. And they quickly discover, for instance, that a totally proportional accompaniment, like you were clapping, is boring. And so let's listen to one boring example. And that's what they're seeing. So you can see there's a spatial analog of the different levels of beats. You were clapping the top one and the middle one, and nobody was clapping the bottom one. But the kids are making these, the computer makes them, but the kids also draw them. So they get very, and oh yeah, you should see here, oh you can't see that. If you look at the numbers on the in the boxes, you'll see that they are, lo and behold, proportional. So some of you were clapping the 18 beat, some of you were clapping the 6 beat, and 6 to 18 is a proportion of 3, and on the bottom is 2 to 1. So there's all kinds of stuff happening here, and the kids are building these things after clapping them. Okay, so, but to make it cool, you need to start perturbing the proportions a little bit. But it's still proportional. If you begin, these are the proportions of it's no longer just a beat. It's now a real percussion accompaniment. And they're playing with the proportions, perturbing the proportions to make something that's more interesting. Okay, so they can make this stuff by thinking about the proportional relationships, but making some conflict with the proportions. Okay, and then, but if they go too far and they stop using proportions altogether, then they get chaos. So you'd have a hard time clapping that, but you could, but you could clap the previous one. Okay, so it turns out that this difference between chaos and conflict has a surprising spin-off. If you listen closely and look at the images that are representing what's being played, it becomes an intuitive path into understanding both musical and mathematical aesthetics. So the kids are actually building this stuff, but they're building it using ratio and proportion. The kid will come up all of a sudden with a statement like, "Oh, that's that least common multiple stuff," and the other part of it is that besides the proportions like here, which this is the first example. These are the number of repeats, and they're proportional too, or they're proportional as well, except as the kids say, upside down. So the longest duration, the big beat, that some of you were clapping, gets repeated 8 times. The 3-to-1 beat has to get repeated 24 times, and that's also 3-to-1, except upside down. Okay, that's pretty much what I have to say. I think Christopher Hastie, who's a music theorist at Harvard, said the rhythmic process of event formation is that of repetition transformed into novelty. I think that works pretty well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Professor Bamberger. I would now like to ask Professor Greher for her presentation.
Thank you. Before I begin, full disclosure here, math was destroyed for me in the 7th grade, and I have never fully recovered from the belief that I'm mathematically challenged. So I'm hoping my participation here will help rectify the situation for other kids like me. So I've been doing a lot of work with Jean's program over the years with my students and with students in my community. And years of doing professional development workshops in general in arts integration with teachers has convinced me that you could have the most well-researched, greatest curricula in the world to hand to teachers, but if they don't buy into it, it doesn't really matter. So one of the things that I've been looking into with working with Jean on this project is, what do the teachers think? And so, and trying to find out if we do this. You know, when Jean is working, we know this works. I have seen this work with kids. I've seen it work with my students. And when we're there to work with her, work with these kids, it's great. But we're sending this idea out onto a website. So what will work? What do the teachers need to buy into this? And so one of the things one of the questions I had going into this, well, we know the software and activities work with kids. What would we need to get math teachers to buy into using the software and doing these projects with their students? Without the benefit of Gene working directly with the teachers, how could we improve the clarity of our presentation of activities to improve the chances that these activities that we know work will actually be used? So we had several iterations. I worked with technology design students at MIT. I worked with some of my math teachers at UMass Lowell, and I worked with math teachers in the community to get some feedback and to see what we needed to do to get our message out there. And overall, the teachers were excited about the possibility of using Making Music Count, that's what we're calling this project, in enrichment and technology periods. Teachers praised the real-world application of math concepts and believed the lessons would be great for students to practice key skills using different learning styles. One of the teachers also felt that the connection between math and music could help many students that struggle in math. And having teachers experience the same struggles that students undergo is powerful because, you know, you're a math teacher, you really understand the concepts you're teaching, but now you're teaching it through music. And you're kind of having to put yourself in a situation that you're out of your comfort zone, you know? And if we're asking people to make these interdisciplinary connections, which I feel and I know is really important for whole learning to take place, there's going to be a little bit of discomfort. But what I tell the teachers is you can learn from your students. Because if you don't think, you know, they'll tell you if you're not clapping the beat correctly. They will. So, you know, they felt it would fill the need, and they also felt that it was really well aligned, that what we're doing is really well aligned with, you know, frameworks for, you know, the 4th, 5th, and 6th grade in terms of ratios, fractions, least common multiples, and, you know, that the standards were very, very clear. You know, what we're doing is we're asking students to analyze patterns and relationships, both in the music and in the math, and, you know, converting measurement units and using equivalent fractions, and, you know, we're getting them to make sense of problems and persevere and reason abstractly. We're modeling for them, and we're looking for and making use of structure. So these are all important concepts that the students need to learn that exist through using this program. And one of the things that was pointed out, we have 2 different views here on the screen of how you can look at the rhythm. And one is at the bottom, the rhythm bars, where you could see the spaces between the notes, but on top, you can actually see the ratio happening. And they likened it to the pattern tapes that they use in their classrooms. So, you know, the great thing about using this program is they get to see and hear what they're doing. You know, and we're asking them to think about, you know, to take a piece of music and listen to it and calculate where the big beat is, and also how many different ways can you make a 2-to-1 ratio musically. Can you go from very, very slow to very, very fast without actually changing the tempo, but you're changing the durational values of the blocks that you're using? And so the teachers felt that these were all important concepts. And what we've done, based on their feedback, is we put in videos of Gene working with kids so that they get to see that. They've asked us to do how-to tutorials on the software, which is in there. And what they wanted to do was hear more contemporary pieces of music that their kids would relate to. So we've got that in there also. And the cool thing about this program, and I have my students do it, is take a pop tune. You know, find a pop tune that you really like and program it in these blocks, and then create an accompaniment for it. So all of that is doable with this program, and there will soon be an app for that.
Thank you very much. I would now like to ask Dr. Eric Rosenbaum, who also worked with Gene and Gina. Eric did 2 separate projects for us.
So I'm super excited to share with you the Scratch Jazz project. It brings together jazz and coding. So I was lucky enough to get to work for a bunch of years at the MIT Media Lab, where I did my PhD. And there I was part of a group that developed something called Scratch, which is a way for kids around the world to use code to bring their ideas to life. If you haven't experienced coding, it's incredibly powerful because you get to use ideas from math and science. You can imagine something in your mind and then bring it to life. And beyond just using the technology in that way, I think the importance of it is showing kids that they can use technology to change the world. So here's the Scratch homepage. So since Scratch was launched in 2007, kids all over the world have been using it to create their own stories and games and interactive art. Instead of typing in text to code, you drag graphical blocks on the screen to create behaviors. And you'll see a quick example of that in the video in a second. But the important thing is, it's not just about learning to code, it's coding to make something that you care about. You can see there in the slide, there's now over 14 million projects created by kids around the world since 2007. So it's been super exciting to see it grow. It's free. It's been translated by volunteers into over 50 languages. And the challenge that we have is that the music functionality of Scratch needed a little bit more love. So I was super excited to have a chance to work on that with the Monk Institute and create the Scratch Jazz project. So for that, we added music-related images and sounds and loops, and we made a tutorial to help kids get started with music. The centerpiece of the project really is the Scratch Design Studio that we launched just a few days ago. So on this page is where kids around the world can find the links to the information to help them get started, see projects that inspire them, but then also contribute their own projects and collaborate with each other. Scratch has a built-in remix functionality, so if Vijay makes a cool jazz project with some ponies in it, and I want to change them to horses, I can download his project, modify it, and upload mine. So kids can remix each other's work and collaborate in that way. And we just launched the Make Music Studio, I guess on Friday. There are over 100 projects already, ranging from interactive drum kits to sequencers to animals making music to field-recorded sounds that are mixed into music in new ways. There's classical music, there's jazz, there's an incredible variety, and it's obviously just begun. Thank you.
So much, Eric. I would now like to introduce Ms. Rajna Swaminathan of Harvard University.
Hello. I'm working on a project called Indian Rhythm in Math, or Indian Music in Math, more broadly. I'm a percussionist. I play the mridangam. It's a South Indian percussion instrument, but I was trained in the Carnatic classical music tradition of South India and have since moved into other genres and done a lot of crossover work, which has involved me, getting involved in educational endeavors that require me to translate these Indian rhythmic concepts to students who might not have had any experience listening to Indian music or were primarily trained in Western music. And one of the strategies that I have now, involved in this math science project from my experience teaching is distilling these very culturally specific musical ideas and concepts into more abstract visuals that can be applied to any form of music. And that's something that I've used in the lessons that I've prepared for this program. But at the same time, while creating visuals that can sort of be understood conceptually, I didn't want to lose sight of the very embodied musical practice that Carnatic music is. So for example, we have an inbuilt way of actually visualizing time, which is a concept called talam, which is basically the equivalent of a Western meter. So for example, an 8-beat cycle in Carnatic music would be beat out like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And within that, so all this is explained in the lessons. Within that, you have the idea of a subdivision, which is very similar to Western music, but slightly different in the Indian context. So students can understand something like proportional relationships or fractions through the idea of a beat being something equivalent to a whole and the subdivisions being various fractions of that whole. So again, the way that it works in Indian music is that you have to embody it. You have to clap it, you have to say it, and we've extrapolated from there to even be able to move spatially and created creative exercises where students can sort of use the room as their musical palette and sort of walk through and imagine these rhythms in space. So for example, the subdivisions might look something like this. Takita, 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 takadimi, 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 takatakita, 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 takita, 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 takadimi, takita, takadimi, takita, takadimi, takita, takadimi, 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 takatakita, takadimi, takatakita, takadimi, takatakita, takadimi, takatakita. So, obviously this isn't something that we expect students to get at 4th grade. I certainly didn't have it when I was in 4th grade. But just to be able to hear, and we're planning to, down the road, record some videos where they can actually see musicians doing this. I'm working with 2 other musicians, Ganavya Doraiswamy and Miles Okazaki, who are both have a significant experience with the Carnatic music tradition, but also are engaging in crossover work. And the other thing that I wanted to talk about is, we can abstract these concepts and treat them visually or treat them as a sort of universal language that can be picked up by anybody. But we also don't want to lose sight of the people behind the tradition. And I think that's what's really important, is that even through math and music, we are giving students a cultural experience too, and teaching them about specific cultural perspective, about people who may live on the other side of the world. And I think math is something that's been a stereotype of Asian Americans in general, Indian Americans. So the other sort of project that I have underlying all of this is to focus on the expressive and creative possibilities that come from the math, and not giving a very two-dimensional view of this culture, but also giving a rich cultural context to every sort of musical idea that's covered. So for example, we have a system of scales in India that's been sort of very mathematically treated, and there's an exercise in this program that deals with finding the permutations and combinations of how do you get to 72 possible melodic scales. But then there will be a little sort of sidebar that says, well, these aren't just treated as scales in this music, they're treated ornamentally, or there's some culturally specific way of how they're actually practiced in this culture, in this tradition. So these are all the ideas that are sort of coming together in this and giving a sense of what Indian music is, how you can relate to it mathematically in the abstract, but also how you can relate to it as a living cultural tradition. Thank you.
It's a real honor to be involved in this project, and I'm thankful for the opportunity to participate in an activity that combines 2 areas that I'm quite passionate about, mathematics and music. So to mathematicians, music is something that's intrinsically interesting, and connections to the physical world might not be so important in order to draw a mathematician's attention. However, others get pulled into appreciating concepts in mathematics because it seems so great at explaining things. When I was a kid, I got very interested in baseball, and baseball statistics kind of pulled me in. And then also at an early age, my dad showed me how the chances of getting dealt various poker hands could be calculated, and I got hooked on understanding ideas around uncertainty and chance. And some of my interest in mathematics has resulted from my appreciating at a relatively young age how mathematics can explain things rather well. Like many areas that one can become interested in understanding, music is rich with structure and questions that are amenable to mathematical treatment, as mentioned by other panelists. Since many people are interested in music, it's only natural to consider whether we can harness this interest to excite them about mathematics. And this is the idea behind my Mathematics of Music course. So the plan of the course is to introduce various ideas at the interface of music and mathematics. Topics in this course will include rhythm and number theory, something that's already been spoken about at length, and involves understanding concepts like prime factorization. Intervals and exponents. Most musicians think about octaves and fourths and fifths, but what is an octave? What's a fifth? Why does breaking up the usual Western octave into 12 half steps make sense? Why does that work? What is the mathematics behind the cycle of fifths? It turns out this all has a mathematical explanation that involves conversion of physical distance on an additive scale to distance on a multiplicative scale, something that the slide rule actually does. But if I mention the slide rule to kids today, they think I'm some sort of dinosaur. But this is all connected to one of the most our generation, right? So, but this all involves a transformation, the exponential function, which is probably the most important function in all of mathematics, and its inverse function, the logarithm function. Sound and signal processing. What gives musical instruments their own unique characteristics? Overtones play a key role, and the discussion of overtones leads naturally to questions of how we represent periodic functions using Fourier and spectral analysis, how we decompose complex sounds into elementary sinusoidal waves. The sounds produced by different instruments have their own attack and decay properties, which involve something called amplitude modulation. Theme and variation and mathematical operations. When a theme is varied in music, the operation carried out can often be described mathematically. It has a mathematical representation. This can be as simple as modulating some melody by raising every note in that melody by a half step, or playing it backwards, or permuting the notes in that melody, or delaying the melody as is done in a canon. So these and similar modifications are special cases of what a mathematician would call group actions. Finally, spontaneity and improvisation. Music played in a predictable fashion is often not as interesting as musical that has some elements of randomness and chance. And randomness plays an important role in music. In some ways, improvised melodic lines can resemble random walks, and arpeggiation over a chord can involve random notes satisfying certain rules. So there's a certain mathematical language for describing random processes satisfying certain rules, which brings us into the realm of what's called stochastic processes, an area of applied mathematics that has a tremendous influence in a variety of application areas, from genetics to epidemiology to finance. So each of the above-mentioned subject areas will be touched upon in this course, and others. The course is aimed at college students who have some interest in music and feel the desire for some mathematics education. The aim of the course is not to make students into better musicians, although that would be a nice outcome, but rather to use music to motivate them developing a better appreciation of mathematics.
We will be closing the presentation segment of this by inviting Dr. Vijay Iyer to make his presentation.
Thank you. I'm Vijay Iyer. I'm a pianist and composer. And a couple of years ago, people at Harvard lost their mind and hired me. So and right around the time that I started, I had the distinct pleasure of introducing one of Mr. Hancock's Norton lectures. And in my introduction, well, those lectures are all on YouTube. I encourage you to check them out if you haven't. It's a masterful tying together of so many different perspectives on music, and to realize that they all came from the same person is kind of staggering. But in my introduction, I said that I'm here because of Herbie Hancock. And it's true. As an artist, as a musician, and as a citizen of the world, he's been a tremendous inspiration and a transformative force for many of us. And I also just want to tell this one anecdote, because this something that just happened this morning is that someone was talking about the new Miles Davis movie, which you may have heard about. It was directed by Don Cheadle, and they were saying, someone was asking, is it any good? And he said, well, the movie's okay, but it's worth the price of admission just so you can hear Herbie Hancock's solo and the ending credits in the jam session. So he's still one of the greatest musicians alive. I just want to make sure you all know that. We're in the presence of royalty. You know, I'm a musician, but I also had a trip through the sciences in my background. I was as an undergraduate, I was a physics and math major, and I ended up doing a doctorate in music perception and cognition. And the reason I did that, rather than I was ready to basically quit physics and be an artist, and I basically did. But what I still was interested in is just I wanted to study music on my own terms and get at some very basic questions about it. It turns out that there's a whole scientific research field called music perception and cognition that deals with these very questions that artists are interested in. You know, there's a lot of talk of putting music in service of math and science, but it's also important to put science and math in service of music. And so this is kind of what drove my interest in this area of study, and it still influences what I do as an artist. And I'm interested in provoking more people to become artists and think creatively, artistically, and that you bring that sensibility to any discipline. So that's kind of what is behind this whole series of lectures that I've compiled. I don't want to be the guy who did it all. I took a page from our president, Barack Obama, who's good at assembling fantastic teams. And so I decided to assemble a killer team of leading researchers in the field of music perception and cognition. So we can go ahead to the next slide. So what I've put together a series of general interest talks on the biological and neurological and cognitive foundations of music. These are basic questions. What is happening in our brains, in our bodies, and our sensory organs when we experience music as listeners and as music makers? Why is music so powerful emotionally? But a more fundamental question that interests a lot of us, not just as scientists, but artists are interested in this question too. I recently interviewed Randy Weston, and he asked this same exact question. How did music evolve? But he asked, why do we have music? He's interested in basic questions like that, and I think this is something that every artist is interested in, because you want to know what it is that you're doing. Why is it that you can blow into a tube and make someone cry? You know, that's kind of amazing, isn't it? Well, I can't do that, but Wayne Shorter can. So how did music evolve? Is it similar to language? What does music do for us as a species, as individuals or in groups? These are some basic questions that interest me and drive my artistic practice and the kinds of questions that I ask as an artist. And so here I'm just going to show you some of the people who are involved in this project. Professor Edward Large, who's a real pioneering researcher in the neuroscience of music. He's put together, slow down, Bob. He's put together already a couple of fantastic video lectures where it's a sort of tour de force. He's really on the cutting edge of this field. Now, you know, you might get scared because these are basically people giving research talks, but they're giving it at a general level. Basically, if you've been able to sit through all of this morning, then you can sit through one of these or any number of them. They're all fantastic teachers and communicators. And, you know, basically this is stuff that I wish I had known or thought about when I was a teenager, you know. And so I wanted to give that experience to others. So he's a professor at the University of Connecticut. Dr. Poppy Crum, who's a badass. She's the chief scientist at Dolby Labs, and she's done a lot of work on neuroplasticity and on sensory intelligence, basically on how we listen. So she's putting together some materials on that topic. Professor Anirudh Patel, whom I've known since the mid-90s when we were graduate students at the same time. We'd run into each other at conferences and get confused for each other. And he's written an award-winning book on music, language, and the brain. basically trying to tease out what these two capacities that we have for language and for music, what they have in common, how they're different, and maybe how they might have evolved together or separately, or when they split, or did they ever split? Is language music? He's interested in these basic questions. He's at Tufts University, just up the street from me. Professor Charles Lim, who's kind of a superstar in the TED world, I encourage you to check out his TED Talk, which has 1 million something hits already, in which he talks about the neuroscience of improvisation. He's maybe famous for putting improvising pianists and improvising rappers in an fMRI machine and taking scans of them while they're doing a control case where they play something from memory, and then an experimental case where they're actually improvising, and looking at what the differences were and what that can tell us about the brain when we're improvising. Of course, we're improvising all the time. I'm doing it right now. All right, so he's up at University of California at San Francisco. Next, please. Oh, that's me, doing what I love. So I put together a couple of lectures on the biological foundations of music, basically asking some of these very fundamental questions. What are we doing when we play music? Where does it come from? And the answer, spoiler alert, is that it comes from us. It's not as, it sounds mysterious or it sounds obvious, but the fact is that music is something that humans created, and we only create it because we could, because our bodies work in a certain way and our brains work in a certain way that enable us to do that. And I go into some detail about how that's true. My dear colleague and friend, a fantastic musician, he's a saxophonist and composer, that's how he's best known. He's also the son of one of the greatest Checaré players in Cuba. His name is Yosvani Terry. And, you know, I was putting together my lecture. Mika came over and recorded it in my office. And that night, while I was kind of compiling my thoughts, I saw Yosvani play and direct the jazz ensemble at Harvard. He's a senior lecturer in the music department where I teach. And he, and what he'll do is he'll get up there and conduct by playing Checaré, which was really beautiful. And I realized that he was enacting exactly what I'm talking about, which is the role of the body in music making. It's a fundamental fact about music, is that it comes from our bodies, it's made with our bodies, it's perceived using the capacities that our bodies have. So I just brought him in to talk about the Checaré, which is one of the oldest instruments in the world. You know, you find it all over Africa. It's made of a gourd, you know, and you play it by throwing it and dropping it and catching it. And so he and I did an interview that's up already on the site where he demonstrates and talks about the bodily basis of the skill involved in this music, in this particular instrument. And then he plays a bit and we play together. It's a lot of fun. So music is a part of all of this because we're talking about where music comes from. So that's about it. Thank you very much. And thank you to Herbie Hancock.
Fantastic. Thank you so much to all of our panelists for their presentations. I would now like to open the floor for any questions that there may be from the audience.
I don't think any of us are proposing we ram music down people's throats, but I do know that for all of our students, music is an essential part of their lives, and if you could show them and demonstrate that these concepts that we are trying to ram down their throats has applications in something that they're really interested in, you will gain the motivation. And if you could develop projects that allow them to use the things they're interested in, which is music, that has all of these scientific and mathematical concepts built in, I don't think you destroy it for them. You know, one of the things I do, and Alex and I have taught this course in sound thinking, and we do this musical flowcharting project where they have to listen to a piece of music and flowchart it. And one of the comments that always comes up from students is how much more they notice about the music and how much deeper they got into the music and how much more they appreciate the music through having done this activity. So I don't think we're going to ruin it for them. I think we might even enhance it for them.
You know, sometimes we have this idea that teaching is very teacher-centered and the children sit at their desks and the teacher guides the student. But a better way is to have the student bring what they know to the classroom, and in this way bring the music they like, and then a good teacher will incorporate it into the class. And that's more child-centered, and it works a little better.
I wanted to ask you, when do young people turn music off? Where did you get that idea that maybe you do, but you're not so young anymore though. I mean, you're not as old as I am, but you know, that's the thing about it. I mean, they use music for everything. I can't do that. I can't study something else while music is going on. They can't study anything without having music on. You know, I have no idea how that's done. I know why, because I was born in 1940 and they were born in the 21st century. And the generations that most of us came from created the mechanisms whereby they are able to do things that we ourselves cannot do. So this idea of it being ruined because they don't have the choice of turning it off actually doesn't apply.
Well, one of the reasons was No Child Left Behind. And all of a sudden schools were accountable for their math and reading scores. And we ended up, we kind of laugh and call it No Child Left Untested. So we did a lot of testing, and if there was music in the school, the children who were doing poorly were taken out for remediation and missed out on the music. However, there's promise, because the new legislation, which took the place of No Child Left Behind, calls for a more well-rounded education, less pullout. So there's promise that it will change.
First of all, I'd like to say that I never thought I'd ever hear my name mentioned with VJ's name in the same sentence. So, this is amazing. But I think, you know, from my understanding, our intended audience was for the math teachers, and it's not to do away with the music teachers. And I know that's what the music teachers are sitting there and texting you about. But the whole idea is if we could all, you know, we have all these teachers in a building, and if we could all work together. One of the things, I teach music educators, and one of the things that a music teacher is one person in a building generally, and is very, very isolated. So I teach a lot about arts integration and the need to connect with your colleagues and to work on projects together so that one isn't in service to the other. And Alex and I have taught this sound thinking course where computing and music are on equal footing. It's not in service to the other, but it's all working together to teach the whole child. And I think that is our focus here.
Can I add something too? Would you tell those music teachers that there's a theory, the diffusion of innovation. How do we get teachers to bring music? Well, there's also positive deviance. So they can be the individuals who start spreading this word, because the teachers across the curriculum will need their expertise.
How I see it, with the program what we created with Sue, we help to the music teachers. So in elementary schools, number one is no music for K-3. Or if the school has music, then usually the PTA somehow helps. But helping with the daily basis, an extra additional 10-15 minutes, what would lead to then additional knowledge, what the music teacher later on can utilize. That's what I believe in. And that's how, because I was raised in a Kodály system, a Kodály education. I was raised in Hungary, was part of the music education was thinking globally.
I've been noticing that a lot of young people are taking it upon themselves to learn things by going to YouTube. And the teaching methods that we have, how old are they? How many hundreds of years old are they? We've been doing the same thing for 200-300 years, maybe more. I don't know, maybe we have some historians that know that. This 21st century is not anything like those other ones. This is very different. And we're seeing a new kind of human being actually bringing themselves into the world. And so we have to do something about re-examining how we've been doing things and find new ways to do things that are commensurate with the world that we live in now and the one that they will build in the future.
In real life, these are not separate disciplines. The math and the music and the science and all of that, the expression are there, and this is an opportunity to highlight how they mutually inform and help each other, and bringing together the diverse set of panelists and projects you see here is one way of pulling that together.
Aren't teachers students too?
Oh, yeah.
Aren't we all?
Zakir Hussain said this recently in an interview. He said, "You can never be a master of anything. You can only be an eternal student." And we all teach and learn from each other. I mean, I learn from my students. And so I would hope that content like what we're providing would inspire teachers and students together to learn something together, you know.
I would like to thank everybody for joining us today. I would like to thank our distinguished panelists once again. Thank you so much for all of your work and your efforts. We look forward to working with you to develop this further on a global scale. So thank you very much.